Hey listeners, did you know that you can get a free mini Body Kindness e-course? Visit bodykindnessbook.com and click Get Started. When you give your name and email, you'll be signed up for the course and you get a video, reflection guide, a sample chapter from my book, Body Kindness, and I'll be checking in with you over email. I hope you sign up. And I also want to let you know if you're thinking about a little bit more support, I have two options. One, you can join a web-based group with the self-reflection prompts from me, and you can get that in a 3-month trial. Visit bodykindnessbook.com/spiral up. And I do one-on-one private coaching sessions. If you'd like to learn more, shoot me an email, Rebecca@bodykindnessbook.com.
Because as long as there is a default body, and as long as we've decided that there are some bodies that are normal and some bodies that are not, as soon as we decide that everybody's just the same, what we really mean is everybody is just like me, which means we should design the world that works for me. And I would offer that that definitely doesn't get everybody what they need. And so the work is to see difference, to be excited about difference, to be difference celebrating. Yes, this room, no room I step in should look just like me. And if it does, it means we're not doing something right. It means something's off. And so how do I make a world that is filled with vibrant shades and textures of humanity, with all sorts of different bodies? And how do I seek out difference as an indicator, not of an unwell world, but of a really rich, well world?
That was Sonya Renee Taylor. She's the founder and radical executive officer of The Body Is Not an Apology, a digital media and education company promoting radical self-love and body empowerment as a foundational tool for social justice and global transformation. Sonya's work as a highly sought-after award-winning performance poet, activist, and transformational leader continues to have a global reach. Sonya's a former national and international poetry slam champion. That's so cool. She's the author of 2 books, including The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love, which is the focus of our conversation today. And it is a great one. There's so many amazing nuggets. It was hard to pull my favorite quote for the opening here. Be sure to listen to the whole conversation today. I do a reading from her book at the end, one of my favorite passages. And I really hope you get something out of our conversation. I think if you're a person who is wanting to make peace with yourself and your body and also better understand the cultural shift that is taking place, you are going to get that in this episode. Take special note of when Sonya talks about the use of weight as an indicator for anything. She considers that as lazy medicine for folks who are focused on doing no harm. How really centering somebody's weight can cause a lot of harm. And I think that's a really important point. I also bring up a question for her, and it has to do with the dietetics community. And I actually use an example of a client and how that person may come in saying something like, I got to get this weight off. And that what it really means to have a weight inclusive approach where you don't center the person's value and worth on their weight and how you really get to know them. And that is in response to questions that have been coming up from other dietitians wondering if the anti-diet movement has gone too far. There was an article where I was quoted in. I'll share that in this podcast episode since it came up in our conversation. And yeah, just to help kind of connect some of those dots there. So if you are someone, whether you're a dietitian or not, but you're just wondering, I'm not sure I really grasped the importance of the anti-diet movement, I think you'll get some benefit out of listening to this conversation and really just understanding that a big cultural system that is shifting is not coming from any one group, like a group of dietitians who are posting pictures of their ice cream cones and saying it's okay to eat ice cream. And also in the same sense, when the typical message from a dietitian is something like, here, enjoy your kale salads all the time, that it is actually a radical idea to show foods that are supposedly forbidden and saying, hey, it's okay to eat these too. But really, the anti-diet movement is about so much more than what we're posting on social media. It is about our freedom and liberation. It's about fighting fighting erasure of people at higher weights. It is about truly enhancing well-being on the individual level, in our homes, in our communities, and our world. So I'm so grateful for Sonya for giving me her time for this conversation. And I really hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Sonya, welcome to Body Kindness. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks so much, Rebecca, for having me.
Well, I would love to just start by sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do for the listeners who may not yet have the pleasure to know.
Awesome. My name is Sonya Renee Taylor. I'd like to say that I am an amazing macaroni and cheese maker, a deep lover of my Yorkshire Terrier, Anastasia Duchess, and the founder and radical executive officer of The Body Is Not an Apology, which is a digital media and education company committed to cultivating radical self-love and body empowerment as the foundational tool for social justice and global transformation.
No small task for you.
No, just, only up to changing the world.
Yes. And you're also a poet as well, right?
I am a poet as well. I've been a performance poet, a professional performance poet, a P3, for about 14 years.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I always like to kind of talk about how I first heard about someone. And I would say, well, actually, so The Body Is Not an Apology is mentioned in Body Kindness.
Oh!
So I had this part 4 called Where You Belong, and it was about building a community of trust, of people you can rely on. And it was like, and basically I was going through and I was like, what are the websites I go to? So that's where The Body Is Not an Apology came out. And I was influenced by your work. And when your name came more attached for me was through Jess Baker when she was on my podcast, just quoting you up and down and left and right and everything like that.
So sweet.
And I've been a huge fan ever since.
Thank you so much. My goal with The Body Is Not an Apology has always been that it is a resource, right? And like people find, there's an amazing team of 32 folks in 4 countries who help make that community work. And so it's absolutely not about me. So I'm so glad that it made the book.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I'm super glad because everybody needs to go and visit and read the writings and embody the idea of the body not being an apology. Well, actually, I'm just curious. Like, I know you share in your book the story about how that all came to be. Are you willing to share a little bit with us about how The Body Is Not an Apology came to be as well?
Absolutely. So it was 2010. And I was on a slam team, and slam is competitive performance poetry for folks who don't know. And there's a team of 4 or 5 of us going to Knoxville, Tennessee to compete. And I was having a conversation with a friend and teammate in the hotel room, and she was sharing with me that she was concerned that she might have an unintended pregnancy by a casual partner that she'd been sleeping with. And I asked her, because I'm nosy, but also because I love my friends and I tend to ask hard questions sometimes. I asked her what had made her decide to have unprotected sex with this casual partner. And, my friend was so incredibly beautifully honest. And it's been one of the things that on this tour, people have really talked about that moment in the book being like just a gut punch for them, because she said, my friend has cerebral palsy. She said, my disability makes it difficult for me to be sexual, and I didn't feel entitled to ask to use a condom. And that, what I'm hearing from people, and what certainly was true for me, is that it just resonated all the ways in which we just hand over our bodies to say sorry. Sorry for not being good enough. Sorry for not being what you want. Sorry, And I said to her in that moment when she shared that with me, I said, your body is not an apology. It's not something that you offer to say sorry for my disability. And whatever whatever got made in that sentence, it just was committed to manifesting. It was committed to coming into being. And so I knew when I said it, I was like, that resonated for me. I think that's going to become a poem. So I decided that I was going to write this poem. And at the time, it was called Untitled, The Body is Not an Apology. And so I wrote the poem. Maybe a few weeks later, I wrote the poem and I began performing the poem. And I really believe that language creates things. And so I think something was happening as I was running around saying the body is not an apology. I think I was challenging all the ways in which I was not living into that creed. And one of the ways I wasn't living into that creed at that moment was that I had a selfie in my phone of me getting dressed for an event. I had on a black corset, and I felt really fabulous and sexy and powerful in my body. And I also completely was listening to the voices that told me, do not share that photo. You are too big. You are too dark. You are too ugly. People will judge you. Do not put that photo on the internet. And on February 9th of 2011, I decided to put that photo on the internet because I saw a photo of a plus-size model named Tara Lynn, who also had just been hired as a lingerie model. And one of the first images I saw of her was her in a black corset. And I was like, oh, someone paid this model a lot of money to put her delicious, vivacious thighs on the internet. I think I'm going to go on ahead and post this photo. And so I posted the photo and I asked others to post photos where they felt powerful and empowered in their bodies. And the next morning, about 30 people tagged me in photos. And I was like, this is awesome. Maybe we just need a space to celebrate ourselves, a space to be unapologetic about our bodies. I'm going to start a Facebook page and I'll call it The Body is Not an Apology.
And then it blew up.
It wouldn't stop growing.
Then the rocket took off.
Yeah. It really was surreal. It was 30 people, then 300, then 3,000, then 30,000. And then people saying, I really love these ideas. Can I help run the page? Can I write things related to these ideas? And so then I would put a call out and say, well, yeah, maybe we should just have a team of writers. So then I got a team of writers and I was like, maybe we should find some people who want to help grow people in other countries. And so then we got an international coordinator. And then I was like, well, maybe someone was like, I want to have a support group. And so then we had a support group coordinator. And before I looked up, we had an entire enterprise.
Well, it clearly says, if nothing else, that people have a deep need to want to experience full embodiment and full permission to take up whatever kind of space, have whatever kind of, mark on their body, what color, whatever it is, that we're desperate for a place to say it's okay to be here and beyond okay. Yeah. It's beautiful and amazing and wonderful.
And I don't have to apologize. And I don't have to apologize.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just, it is really, unfortunately, in our culture, a radical idea to accept yourself and love yourself and all that. I mean, how dare we just let ourselves be, Yeah,
well, I mean, the reality is that the world makes a lot of money off of our self-hatred. And I asked the question in my workshops, whose agenda is your self-hatred? Because the reality is that someone totally is economically and politically invested in you having a poor relationship with your own body and you having a poor relationship with the body of others. So much of what I call the de-indoctrination of body shame is about recognizing that we didn't give it to ourselves, that it's been strategically given to us, and that we are actually serving some other master when we choose to keep it. And we don't have to do that.
Yeah. It's like what we call our normal in culture is conforming to a thin, white, cisgender, able-bodied ideal. And that is normal, right? And anything that doesn't line up with that normal, so if you're depending on how close you are to that normal, you put all your effort into getting closer or keeping your place.
Exactly. Falling into the body hierarchy, right? Which how can I get closer to the top of the ladder? And I think that there's a way that we have subconsciously invested in that ladder because it actually comes with resource, right? It actually comes with opportunity. It actually makes the world safer. And so there's a way that we can acknowledge that we've absolutely taken on that thinking without shame. Like, of course we have. The world has told us we had to if we wanted to survive. And when we dismantle that hierarchy, we actually create a world that works for everybody, which means a world that works for our own bodies.
Right. I mean, that's why, like, for me, so the body is not an apology is for everyone. It doesn't necessarily like have to have a quote health component the way that we think of health in our culture, right? But like me speaking as the label of the registered dietitian and the exercise physiologist and the person that's like health promoting, right? I have come to completely reframe. I mean, I think I'd love to put our definitions of health in a dumpster, set it on fire and start over again, So like, I mean, I fully embrace health at every size. And that journey for me started around 2007. And there's certainly, I see how the forces of culture have pushed those who are these health providers who are open-minded and who are curious to look at the world differently and see health differently. And then so in the bubbles of health, we are embracing health at every size and using it. Well, how do I take like what I know, like what is science versus culture versus my values and line that up into the work that I'm going to do? So it's, like, no, it's not like any sort of like, this is a cultural shift that's happening through many different forces, and it just so happens that it is going to create an impact on how we see and work with and view health. And the way that it's going to improve is through focusing on well-being and including all those who are the most marginalized. And that is to me the value in the health conversation.
Absolutely. And I think really talking about like this word well-being for me is a more resonant word. One, because there's no way to really divorce. I love this idea of putting all the definitions of health in a dumpster and setting them up.
And playing a really angry song while we do it.
I love like Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire."
And dance party. I love it. We're going to do it.
I'm all about it. But I love this, like we cannot talk about health without talking about the inherent ableism in the word, right? The way in which we have made health part of the body hierarchy. All right. And so that healthy bodies are better bodies, right? Which does what for people who inherently cannot be healthy, right? For people who will never fit that model that we've put forth in the world. And so when we start talking, and that we've also really divorced the word healthy from like, what does it mean to have a healthy economic system? Which to me means that provides for everyone. And what does it mean to have a healthy political system, which means that we don't have the dumpster fire that we have in the current administration. And so like there's this sort of segregation of the word healthy, that it only applies to people's bodies and not to the other frameworks and ways in which people's bodies exist in the world. And that it immediately excludes some bodies, which means that we've left that system of hierarchy in place. And as long as that system of hierarchy is in place, it means that we will not rid ourselves of oppression. And so as soon as something leads me back to, inherently oppressive, it means it's got to go. We've got to figure out something new.
Yeah. And what I also appreciate about the focus of understanding like cultural systems that are at play and things that are outside of your controls. So much of this conversation of when we feel othered is, and I'm the problem. What is wrong with me? Mm-hmm. I mean, when I have a client day, I could put any bet on the fact of the shame and self-blame that's going to show up in the room.
Mm.
And, there is very little awareness or knowledge that there are systems set up
Yeah.
to drive yourself to have that hatred, and how that hatred is so unhelpful. And we touched on it earlier, and I remember reading in your book a story about lipstick and loving this lipstick color. And I love that story and want to talk about it because I think kind of what you were trying to get at is like we live in this culture that does have a value around health and beauty and size and all these other things. And like, we can't help but be part of it in some way. And yet we could still fight to change the culture while almost like feeling better maybe about ways we participate. I don't know if that's articulating it correctly, but I know there was a lipstick story.
Yeah.
So why don't I ask that question?
There was a lipstick story. So it's really, in the book, I talk about what are the ways that we, just like you said, are participating in the what I call the body profit shame complex, or the body shame profit complex, the BSPC, which is this giant, enormous global economic system that reaps billions of dollars each year off of making us feel like crap about ourselves. And that it's not the idea that I bought lipstick and so I'm a terrible person participating in the body shame profit complex, right? No, that it is about in being an inquiry about the why we do what we do, not so much the what we do. Sometimes what we do can also tell us some things, but why really gives us good answers. And so if I am buying the lipstick because I'm committed that I cannot be seen in the world without lipstick, I'm hideous and the world will flee, then that tells me that I'm really deeply invested. I've deeply internalized the messages that the body shame profit complex would like me to hold on to. It means I'm going to buy lipstick for the rest of my life.
Lipstick and cream and powder and potion and whatever.
And anti-aging cream or whatever else it was. For me, back in when I first started The Body Is Not an Apology, it was wigs. I had a hair shame because I had developed traction alopecia as a child. And so I wore wigs all the time for years and years and years. And I wouldn't go out of the house without my wigs. And I had made all sorts of elaborate stories about why I had wigs. Oh, I get to be a different character. I look so fabulous. But underneath all of those things was I'm ashamed that I'm convinced that I cannot be beautiful without these wigs. And so that why am I doing this gave me answers. And so I had to go and really excavate that shame, really look at the source of it, look at who gave me that message, look at why I chose to keep it, look at how it was impacting my life, and then do some really deep healing work to let go of that story. So today, if I put on a wig, which is pretty rare these days, but if I do put on a wig, it's not because I hate myself. It's not because I don't think I can be beautiful without it. It's because I really do just want to play dress up that day, or I really do just want to have an afro. But that inquiry into the why really is rich soil for us to figure out in what ways have I internalized these systems that are there to exploit me. And we can do that without shame. We didn't give it to ourselves, but we certainly are not obligated to keep it.
Yeah, I just think it's such a powerful difference, because there are even times where I myself can get tripped up, but certainly people who are earlier on in, never dieting. I definitely agree with you how you talked in your book about it's not just body acceptance, because that's it's radical self-love. I'm 100% with you, but their baby step might be, wait, you want me to accept myself as I am, So they're early on in that, and it's just and everything seems so hard because their eyes are more open to diet culture. So it's they go grocery shopping and they see this giant sign for the Whole30 program, and that feels triggering. Or I like to do all types of things. I'm able-bodied, total privilege with that, and I've been doing movement of different types for years. And there's all different types of things I like, but it's when I go to this, challenging fitness class that I really enjoy. It's low impact. It builds strength. I get this second thought of like, oh, and you're funding this person's paycheck who, even they're like, it's about strong. It's that sort of, it's still that beauty ideal, strong is the new thin kind of a thing. But there's this like little devilish voice that's like, oh, should you really be supporting that? And it's like, I have to push pause, hold myself with kindness and say, you know what? There are lots of reasons why you engage in meaningful movement. And some of those are getting to go to a class where somebody else tells you, put this leg here and do this thing. You don't have to think. And in the end, you feel better. And while we'd love to wave a magic wand and just fix everything at once, today, as you care about, doing well in your work and doing well as a mom, you need this class and it's okay to go here and do this thing. But people really struggle with that kind of like, almost they feel like they're straddling paradigm, one foot in and one foot out. So do you have any kind of response or encouragement so people keep coming in the direction of radical body love while they're aware that the world is still messed up?
Yes, absolutely. So in the book, I also talk about this idea of best interest buying versus detriment buying, right? Which is like, what are the ways in which what I do and how I spend my money very particularly impact my own investment in my own radical self-love journey? And am I paying for or doing things that further body shame, or am I doing things that move me along in my radical self-love journey? The things that we're doing that fuel body shame, I call those detriment buying, right? Like things that are really stripping us of our inherent sense of value. And then radical self-love, best interest buying, right, moves us in the direction of radical self-love. But what I'm clear about in the book, and that I want people to really get, is that we are always, as long as we live in a system of body shame and body-based oppression, we will always be straddling worlds. There's no way not to. There is no perfect, untouched body utopia where all that we do has no harm anywhere, right? That's just not possible. And so for me, the work is, how do I do the least amount of harm to myself, and how do I do the least amount of harm to others? And where do I have the most efficacy in doing that? And there will be times when the question is, does this thing that is not 100% perfect move me in the direction of radical self-love for myself? And if the answer is yes, then do it. Do it with awareness. But one of the things we do is we kind of want to, because we don't want to feel bad about ourselves, then we just don't interrogate where things come from at all. And I would offer that once we make peace with the reality that we live in an imperfect world, once we make peace with the reality that we live in imperfect bodies and that our imperfect bodies are okay, that there's nothing to be ashamed about as a result of that, then we can make those decisions with greater autonomy. We can make those decisions with a greater sense of personal choice in it. And so it doesn't have to be like, I'm a bad person because I went to the class that still uses the word strong. I am an awesome person today for doing this thing that I know moves me in the direction of my own radical self-love. And in what ways is my allowing myself to be 100% present with my own radical self-love journey absolutely going to influence this space to think and be different? Because we have the power to change spaces, but we actually feel so diminished in our own self that we forget that all of this is contagious. Whether we're talking about radical self-love or whether we're talking about body shame, we're always spreading one of them. Mm-hmm. So let's figure out where we want to go be radical self-love contagions.
Mm-hmm. It is contagious. I mean, just in my own perspective of when I first heard about health at every size, and I joined Association for Size Diversity and Health around 2007, 2008, and then just kind of watching the contagion spread. And I really think that literally our kids will save us type of mentality. Like I just see a growth, at least in the dietetics community, where younger dietitians we still have, our training is horrible for a weight inclusive paradigm. And there's so much work to go, but they're actually kind of coming in, hearing about health at every size, wanting to embrace it and wanting to go down on a path of learning and growing and doing things differently. And And that's just in one little aspect, right? I really see it as inevitable evolution that is happening, and all the different, players are going to be impacted in one way or another. As long as we keep doing our thing, too.
As long as we keep doing our thing, right? And I think that contagion, I don't want to make it sound, simple, which I think sometimes we do. Oh, it's so easy. And I'm like, that's not true. Let's stop lying.
Just repeat this mantra 3 times and the world's problems will be solved.
Right. The world's problems will be solved. You'll never have another negative thought about your own body. That's not a true thing. But what we can say is that, one, there is power in numbers, right? And it's one of the reasons why in the book I talk so much, and I love hearing you talk about, like, be in community. You're going to have to find your tribe, because this work is not easy, but it is so much easier when we're in relationship with one another, when we're really building from a collective space. And that collective space not only fuels us, but it is a function of power. It gives us the power to move and shift systems. And we see that in the world right now with all sorts of movements. And so, hop on a movement. Hop on a movement and be with other people who are going in the direction you're going. And then you have the force that you need to begin to shift some things.
Yeah. And actually it's reminding me of something that I read in your book that I'm just going to read on here if it's okay. And you talk about the 3 pieces. Make peace with not understanding, make peace with difference, and then make peace with your body. So would you be willing to kind of highlight them for us?
Absolutely. So I really see the struggle. People are like, I'm just really struggling with radical self-love, right? And that's sort of my 3-piece recipe right there. Is like, how do we begin to really move in the direction of a radical self-love world? And the first one is to make peace with not understanding. We really treat understanding as like the holy grail for whether or not things get done in the world. And I offered that we do not have to understand anything to love it. Or to make room for it, or to create space for its existence. And the truth of the matter is that there are lots of places in the world where we know we don't understand it, and yet we're fine. I don't understand open heart surgery, but I bet you if I needed a triple bypass, I would lay on a table. I would let someone who did understand it take care of that, right? And so we don't have to understand people's bodies to allow people's bodies to exist unapologetically. I listened to conversations about whether or not trans folks have the right to use the bathroom that correlates with their gender. The idea that we would have to understand it to make room for people to pee where they need to pee is absurd. It's absurd, right? And it's actually not about them. It's about us and the fact that we're like, well, I don't understand it, so it can't exist. And what I'm offering is that you don't need to understand it to make room. And part of the reason we hold so tightly to understanding as the sort of barometer is that we have so much messaging in the world telling us if we don't understand something, it's our failure. Something's wrong with us. Like, well, if you don't understand that, then that just means you're stupid. And I would offer that no, there are lots of things humans don't understand. And as soon as we make peace with the fact that there are things that we will never understand, I will never understand what it means to be a person who lives with a borderline personality disorder, or at least I don't know that I will because I don't live with that. I won't understand what it means to be a trans woman because I'm a cisgender woman. And I don't need to understand that experience. You won't understand what it is to be a Black woman because you're not. And that's okay. It's okay that you don't understand that. And that doesn't mean you cannot be in solidarity with me. And that does not mean I cannot be in solidarity with you. So that's peace with understanding. Part of the second one is peace with difference. And peace with difference, I also think, lives in that realm of peace with understanding. But it's a little bit, we don't like difference. And I think some of that is in part evolutionary, right? Like we have literally, physiologically been ingrained to think of difference as a indicator of danger. it's how humans have lasted this long. That's not a person in my tribe. That's a bear. Kill it, right? Right, run, right? Or skin
Yeah.
or kill it for dinner next week, right? Like there's an evolutionary function in making the ability to see difference, right? I am here for seeing difference. I want us to see difference. I actually think the world is a more valuable and vibrant place when we are intentional about seeing difference. Our work is to divorce difference from danger. And that in some ways that's asking us to evolve, to literally evolve. But it's possible. And so there's a way in which, we treat the road to world peace as if we all just recognize we're all the same. And I would offer that just is guaranteed way to erase people, right? Because as long as there is a default body, and as long as we've decided that there are some bodies that are normal and some bodies that are not, as soon as we decide that everybody's just the same, what we really mean is everybody is just like me, which means we should design the world that works for me. And I would offer that definitely doesn't get everybody what they need. And so the work is to see difference, to be excited about difference, to be difference celebrating. Yes, this room, no room I step in should look just like me. And if it does, it means we're not doing something right. It means something's off. And so how do I make a world that is filled with vibrant shades and textures of humanity, with all sorts of different bodies? And how do I seek out difference as an indicator, not of an unwell world, but of a really rich, well world? And I think I think there are some comparisons we can look at. The reality is that if the world were, only Labradors, me as a Yorkie owner, I'd be very sad. If the world was only blue and not green and pink and orange, and what a boring world, right? And so we can learn to really love difference and look for it, seek it out as an indicator of a world that's actually doing well. And then lastly is we got to make peace with our own body. That how we see our own bodies, we talked about this a second ago, is contagious, right? Our relationship with our own bodies is not an individual experience. It is a collective experience. We are always transmitting that in the world. We are always either furthering the message of radical self-love or furthering the message of body shame. And so when we make peace with our own body, we are actually creating a planet that is closer to making peace. Like we are part of the planet, right? Like and so every time we move one more person closer to divesting from a system of body-based hierarchy, then that's one less person holding that system up. If we do that 7 billion times, then we don't have that system anymore, right? And so our relationships with our bodies helps to create the world we live in. And we get to decide what is the world I want to create inside of me so that I can be intentional about the world I want to create outside of me. And making peace with our body is how we get there.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the ways in which whether it's the secure your oxygen mask analogy that no one can imagine doing. What do you mean me first? But that it is that by doing some of the inward self-care type work, it does transform your mindset and it energizes you in a way so that then you can continue to make waves out there in the world. So it's not necessarily first this and only this and then that. Like you can take action while having compassion that you are on your own journey and you're evolving. And as you evolve, you'll get even better at doing these differences that you can make in the world. But everyone needs to have the permission and space to make peace with themselves, not just the ones who are closest to that thin ideal.
Absolutely. And what happens is when we don't do that, we actually replicate the systems that already exist. And the reason we do it is because they're still in us. There's still the tools we're building from. So we, like, and this is the thing I talk about a lot when I talk about movement work or people who are in the social justice world, and why I feel like this book is really important for folks in that world too, which is that we say we want a world that is equitable and just and compassionate, while we have inequitable, unjust, mean relationships with our own selves. And I'm like, I don't know how we get there.
The cobbler's kids have no shoes, right?
Right. And so it requires of us, our work, it requires of us to cultivate inside of us that which we say we want to bring about in the world. And that doesn't mean perfectly, but it means on the journey. It means learning the tools for ourselves. It means practicing it as an inward practice to manifest an outward reality.
Well, I have a question. I just be curious about your response. Just something that I'm noticing, within the world of registered dietitians, right, nutrition experts, and like we are overwhelmingly, through the training, our internships, everything is all weight normative. It's, higher weight is automatically an unhealthier weight. And by all means, you should focus on weight loss as the goal, as the outcome. And so I was recently interviewed for this article that was by a fellow dietitian, and it was an opinion piece that I knew that I was the alternative. Like I was the naysayer, because it was like, is the anti-diet movement gone too far, And I know, isn't that funny? I know. Cause it's like, and I'm like, and in my responses, I was like, shit, it hasn't gone far enough, but I just kind of feel, like when I read the piece, and then there was, of course, some conversation going on, and kind of like what we've been talking about, like everyone has permission to be where they are. And I remember being at that sort of, oh shit moment. Can I refund all my clients' money who I've been doing weight loss for years? So I don't expect anyone to be exactly where I am on the journey. It's not really about that, but it was like, the complaint was, oh, I've seen dietitian posting Instagram pictures of pizza and giant ice creams. And is this sending the wrong message? And, it's like you read the article and it's almost like I have to ask, what is missing? Because it's almost like they act like, well, I don't understand. If a client comes and says, yeah, I want to lose some weight, and I can help them like cut a glass of wine here and there and give them more structure, like then I'm being helpful. And like, for me, I'm just like, well, the approach is about actually, looking at why they are having this war with their body, and what are they actually doing for their self-care and well-being, and that it's okay for them to want to lose weight because, of course, culture says so. Like I had a recent male client who'd been through drug treatment who came in and sat down and said, first words out of his mouth, got to get this weight off. Like, I'm not going to slam my door in his face because that's the first word out of his mouth. But in the way that I practice, it is about understanding, and I would add in people who I think are practicing from the health at every size mindset philosophy, is that it is about being there with the person and truly helping them from a holistic sense. But that body that's walking in the door is not a problem. And weight loss is not the answer for that person. And it's not about trying to control their body in either way, and just with minor digging, he said, well, I had lost a bunch of weight when I did vegan for 50 days, but on day 51, I'm sure you're not going to be surprised, he went and had a major bin fest on all the meats he could possibly eat. And so it was like to him, it was mind blowing that the idea wasn't super extreme, and that the first goal was his daily breakfast of running through the fast food for convenience was I was like, tell me what you would love to enjoy that you've had before. And he mentioned this fruit smoothie that he did when he was doing vegan. I was like, how about every other day? How does that sound doable? And he felt, well, you should be giving me more. And so it was like this idea where he needed me to be the calm one and needed me to be the one to kind of talk about how he sees himself and his critic, and that this weight is not a problem. Let's look at your life and your well-being, and let's talk about how we can use compassion and some simple planning. But that, like, I don't put him on the scale and weigh him, and I don't high five him. It's like, I get that if people adopt behavioral changes, some may lose weight. But when you don't help them see what they can't see because they haven't been down that road yet, right? Like diet culture and all these things, you're doing a disservice. But also, you then, like you're saying earlier, you uphold the whole system.
The whole system.
As opposed to, let me help this person reframe their mindset around well-being and help give them that space to say, my body is not an apology, right? And I'll practice self-care, which will lead to habits. And then even he's coming around to like, yes, I still want to lose weight. And I get the idea that it's more important to give up control. And it's like, so I just want to know your response to that, because it's just like, I just feel like that's the missing piece. We immediately go back to overweight and obesity and this and that. And it's really frustrates me that medical culture has upheld body shame.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
Thoughts?
One, I really think that the use of weight as an indicator of anything is lazy medicine. I really think it's lazy medicine, because it doesn't ask you to actually get to know a person, right? And that's part of, like, if we're going to talk about sort of the larger system of the medical industry and the ways in which it totally is exploiting and harming people with folks who have oaths to do no harm, totally harming people. The notion that weight gets to be the sort of like summary indicator of someone's well-being absolves that professional of actually having to get to know that human being, right? And actually getting to know the other things that are going on with their body and in their lives that have better answers, that just have better answers. That conversation with that client where he was able to be like, I went on this vegan thing for 50 days. And on day 51, I binge ate, right? I was like, there's a conversation there that isn't about weight loss at all, that is about what happens when we restrict and punish ourselves, right? Because that sounds like a real punishment mindset, that like, I'm going to do this and I'll get this weight off. Oh, and as soon as someone gives me my freedom, I am going to, like, that's about scarcity. That's about what am I allowed to have and what am I not allowed to have. And there's some rich investigation underneath that about where those patterns and beliefs came from. And those things will help that person get 10 billion light years further down the road than helping them figure out how to get that weight off, right? And again, when we really let go of the idea that bodies are wrong, right? Like, I just take offense to the idea that there's an entire world attempting to eradicate my body, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's an entire world every day trying to figure out how to get rid of my body, and then telling me that that's healthy.
And Deborah Gard, who you mentioned in your book, and I love her. She's a gift to the world.
Yes.
But she talks at events about, well, we have the genes of survivors. Like, we are here. Stop trying to eradicate us. And it is so true.
Absolutely.
The fat gene is making it.
It is surviving. It does not want to be defeated.
Exactly. And it won't be. It won't be. So and look, we're not trying to ignore food systems and availability issues, but we know that there are those issues with respect to food deserts and income levels and access to quality food and how food is regulated and lots of problems that all need to get pushed and moved and resolved, but that doesn't give you the right to oppress a person at a higher weight.
Exactly. And what happens when we start actually taking the pressure that we're putting on individuals to lose weight and putting that pressure on the systems and structures that continue to oppress people based off of food? Like, what happens when we decide that no, food deserts are unacceptable, that a lack of nutritious options and fresh fruits and vegetables in any neighborhood or community is unacceptable, rather than asking people who literally only have access to KFC and McDonald's why they're fat and such bad people, And so I think And I am a firm, like, there is nothing that my weight is going to tell you that other markers that are free of stigma and shame could tell you. Right. So why are we not looking at, if we want to talk about health, great. Let's talk about my cardiovascular fitness. Let's talk about how my central nervous system is working. Let's talk about what are the things that I'm doing in my daily life that bring me joy and peace, because I know that those bring down my cortisol levels in my system. What is it? What are we talking about in terms of, like, am I meditating? And do I have good family relationships? The actual markers of well-being. And when we focus on those, and don't focus on weight, we actually can get people to states of holistic well-being that may or may not involve weight loss, right? And the work is, how do I teach folks to love and care for the body they have, regardless of the weight that they're at? Because we act as if weight loss, particularly given in the structure that we live in, doesn't come at a deep detriment to other parts of our wellness, right? And so it's like, but you're unhealthy. Guess what? I'm unhealthy hating myself too. I'm unhealthy when I'm suicidal because I can't get off 20 pounds, you know? And so why is it that we decided that unhealthy based on weight is worse than unhealthy based on mental health?
Yeah. And it's like we need a certain amount of what would be better support is resilience in diet culture.
Absolutely. Resilience and what is your relationship with food, which is not a conversation about weight, right? It doesn't have to be a conversation about weight. It's rarely what we do and almost always why we do it. And that's an important conversation to have. I've been having that conversation with myself since I've been on this book tour for 10 billion days, it feels like. And I was like, oh, I'm eating for comfort. Like, I'm just eating on the road and I'm eating for comfort. And I'm eating for comfort because I'm lonely and I'm feeling disconnected. Okay. All right, Sonya, well, what helps you feel more connected? Right. And then I get to have a conversation about who I am and what's really going on. If I just was having a conversation about the 10 pounds, then I would be doing just a different set of disconnecting, unhelpful behaviors.
Yeah. And I mean, I would even argue that comforting during a high stress energy time where you have so much good that you need to output into the world so that the book and your message can do all the good work it needs to do, that's actually helpful fuel.
Absolutely.
That's not going to send you to the emergency room.
Absolutely. Right. And that we can talk about those things without the framework of good and bad, right? Just like, oh, does that work for me? Do I feel good? Is that, like noticing, oh, well, the burger didn't feel good in my body. Okay. Well, so maybe not the burger tomorrow. Right. And I can ask that question without shame. And I can ask that question without stepping on a scale.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And that's why everyone listening has already went to wherever books are sold and purchased The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love. This has been such a great conversation, and I've really enjoyed talking with you. I was hoping I could read one of my favorite passages from the book before we close, and then make sure that we share how people can get in touch with you, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, that totally works.
Okay, so this is from Sonya Renee Taylor. It is through our own transformed relationship with our bodies that we become champions for other bodies on our planet. As we awaken to our indoctrinated body shame, we feel inspired to awaken others and to interrupt the systems that perpetuate body shame and oppression against all bodies. There is a whisper we keep hearing. It is saying we must build in us what we want to see built in the world. When we act from this truth on a global scale, using the lens of the body, we usher in the transformative opportunity of a radical self-love, which is the opportunity for a more just, equitable, and compassionate world for us all. Raising hand, praising you right there. If you could see me, I got my hands up.
Yes.
I mean, that moves me. That is a passage I read at a recent speaking engagement while holding up your book. And I'm just so committed to anything I could do to help support this book and you and your work, because you are so, whatever forces made you ask the question about Why aren't you using condoms? Thank you for that, because now the world has this amazing book. So how can people, the book's available everywhere books are sold, right?
Yep, everywhere.
And how can people
And if
find
it
and
isn't,
follow
you should
and
just
connect?
tell them to get it.
Yes, go in the store and say, you need this book.
Yes.
How else can people find and connect with you?
You can find me at my website, SonyaReneeTaylor.com. You can find me on all the social medias. Instagram and Facebook are my sort of two of choice, and they're both Sonya Renee Taylor. You can find The Body is Not an Apology and the work that we are doing in community around these issues at thebodyisnotanapology.com and on all of the social medias, also at The Body Is Not an Apology.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. I really appreciate you.
And that's our show. Let's continue this conversation in our Facebook group. Just search Body Kindness Podcast and ask to join the group. We also love ratings and reviews. Please subscribe to the Body Kindness Podcast and give us an honest rating and review. And if you can, tell a friend. If you'd like to support the podcast for the 2018 season, please donate at gofundme.com/bodykindness.